team at Exavalue. Exavalue is a digital advisory and solutions firm that focuses on the insurance space, and we helped establish the Insurance Executive Forum, and although otherwise known as the IEF. And IEF is a platform really for leaders in the industry that are implementing digital transformation and innovation projects within their respective firms. And it's a platform really to share lessons learned and best practices amongst our community. And we have a number of venues for doing that, and the webinars that you're attending today is one of those. And I'm very excited today that we have an excellent group of panelists, and we'll be talking about the subject will be driving innovation in insurance sales and distribution. I will be kicking this off, and then we'll get going. I do want to have just do a very quick shout out to MuleSoft, who is sponsoring today's session. As many of you know, MuleSoft is a leader in the API-led integration space, and they provide the technology that's enabling a lot of the integration and innovation that's going on. That's really enabling us to kind of companies to move forward in their transformation program. So thank you, MuleSoft. Next slide, please. Just some quick housekeeping. So today's webinar is 1 hour long. We hope to finish at 10 a.m. Pacific. So we're going to keep this going at a fair pace. We have a lot to cover. We would ask that you enter any questions that you may have within the chat window in Zoom, and we set some time aside at the end to answer any questions you have. If we don't get to all of your questions, we will make sure we follow up and get your responses via email. This event will be recorded, and we will be posting the recording on the website, and you can access that whenever you like. But just give us a day or so to get it up there. And finally, we will be sending a quick survey after this event. We would very much appreciate if you just took a few minutes to fill it in. There's only 6 questions, I believe. It really helps us to kind of fine tune these events and make sure that they're, valuable to all of you. So we'd appreciate if you could do that. Next slide. So we have a really outstanding group of speakers today, and in a minute we'll have them introduce themselves. But just very quickly, we have Abi Husseini, who's the CIO of Mercury Insurance Group. We have Lisa Perez, VP of IT Digital Transformation at the Hanover Insurance Group. We have Brad Lance, Senior Vice President and CIO of Copper Point Insurance. And then we have Nachiket Jureka, who's Head of Insurance Consulting at Exavalue. And last but not least, we have Colleen Conahan, who's Head of North American Insurance at Celent. And I think many of you will be familiar with Celent. They do some excellent analysis and research papers as well as advisory in the insurance space. And we thought it would be interesting if we kicked off this discussion today with a kind of a quick overview from Colleen based on Celent's research in kind of what's going on in the distribution space. And so we will have Colleen do that, and then we will have Colleen lead the discussion, really using her presentation as the base, the foundation for the rest of the panelist discussion. So with that said, I would like to hand this over to Colleen to take it away. Thank you, Colleen.
Thanks so much, Tezpal, and hi, everybody. I'm delighted to be here. This is an area we have been doing a ton of research on. Things are changing so dramatically in the world of the independent agent. And let me just quickly talk about some of the 3 biggest changes that are occurring, because these are things that are requiring insurance carriers to respond. This first one is this whole bucket of the shifting customer expectations and disintermediation, right? Customers, we all know this from the insurance perspective, the insurer carrier perspective, customers expect to be able to engage digitally, to be able to engage at any time in any manner that they expect. And this does not change if you're an agent versus an insurance carrier. Many agents, though, if you ask them, how do they differentiate themselves? They say, oh, it's our service. And if you ask, well, What happens if your customer needs service on the weekend? They're a little perplexed. They don't really have a good solution for that. And because they aren't necessarily able to provide services at the time that the customers need, customers are beginning to disintermediate and go to other channels. I'll show you momentarily some of the things that we're seeing. In order to deliver this digital expectation, though, the insurance agents have to do their own digital transformation, and this can be challenging for many. While the very largest agencies, of course, have a full IT department focused on, building capabilities, just as insurance carriers are, the reality is that the smaller and smaller the agents go, many small agents don't have anybody responsible for IT, or not even a single person. A person might share their role. And so at this time in the world of the agencies where they need to be embracing digital and technology more effectively, many of them simply don't have the funds or the capabilities to be able to utilize that. And going along with all of this is the shifting workforce. The Department of Labor will tell you that 29% of all employees in the agency world in the United States are over the age of 55, and 15% are over the age of 65. What do you do if 30% of your employees retire in 10 years? I mean, you have only two options, right? You can replace them, which is challenging. And by the way, they all need to be trained. And most agencies don't have full-time training departments. And so it ends up being, on-the-job training. Or the other option is to simplify the job, use technology to automate work so that you don't need as many people. But again, many agencies don't have that capability, and they are relying on the carriers to provide that level of technology for them, which places more burden on the carriers and their portals. When we talk about disintermediation, it's not an idle concern. If you look, in the past, it used to be that the independent agents mostly competed with themselves and a few of the direct writers. But over the last 5 to 10 years, we've had this explosion in different kinds of channels, whether it's the digital lead generators, where the buyers go to get access to quotes, or the digital agencies. We've seen a number of digital MGAs going direct to consumer, and of course, carriers themselves going direct to consumers. We've seen partnerships where a customer may go to Geico, for example, and instead of then going to an agent to get their homeowner's insurance, Geico has a partnership with firms like Allstate, with firms like Homesite in order to provide that homeowners. And so some of these customers are being diverted away from the independent agency channel. Of course, the newest trend of embedded insurance, buying insurance with the actual product at the point of need. And we're seeing this increase in the platforms, some of which are extending their capabilities out direct to consumer. So this concern of disintermediation is not unfounded. It also, by the way, creates some challenges for carriers, because carriers are looking at adding all of these channels, which requires some work on their end in terms of real-time integration as opposed to asynchronous. Now we did a couple of surveys last year where we surveyed insurance agents, and these challenges are absolutely impacting the agency plant. 81% of principals said, yes, we're putting more focus than ever on managing expenses. 76%, I would send more business to insurers if they just improved their technology and made it easier. I've had principals tell me, Carlin, if you make it 25% easier to place business, I'll give you 25% more business. You can see 66% worried about shopping online, trying to figure out how to keep those customers themselves, and having challenges growing revenue. And almost 60% saying, yes, we are having problems getting qualified account managers and CSRs. All of these things have impact on the insurance carrier, what you can do to improve your own technology, how you can support your agents in maintaining those customers who otherwise might want to go direct, helping them by automating some of the tasks so that the account managers don't have to be as heavily trained. And we asked the agents, what causes you to choose one company over another when it comes to placing business? And is anybody surprised that price is number one? Yeah, no. Followed by ease of doing business, and actually 91 and 90, I would consider that the same number. So you've got to have a good price. You have to be easy to work with. And the next one down is the relationship with the carrier. So some very clear aspects that matter when it comes to choosing where to place the business. Now, we did a follow-up with, and thinking about where you personally place the most business, how do those folks rank? And what you find is it shifts just a little. Ease of doing business becomes number one. Relationship number two, and good price for the product drops down to number three. There's a couple of other factors here, though, interestingly enough. Way down here, way down, 77% still say this, easy onboarding, licensing, and appointment. Because we're seeing so many mergers and acquisitions as the older principals are exiting, the agents are quite interested in making sure that it's easy to onboard a lot of new agents to make sure that they're licensed and appointed appropriately. And we also see that the commissions in the preferred agency program, while they're down towards the bottom, are still very important at 72%. And let me say they're more important for the younger principals and for mid-sized agents. So insurance carriers are responding to this. They're focusing on investing in that agent digital experience. You know, most folks have some kind of a web portal. Most have some kind of upload, download. We're seeing new ways of communicating with the agents. And look at this API integration with the agency systems is really rapidly increasing. You know, 5 years ago, this number was quite low, but it's been rapidly growing as the carriers are integrating directly with agency management systems, integrating directly with the platforms, the exchanges, the comparative raters, and with the digital agents. And so most insurance carriers are either already utilizing APIs or in the planning phase, in the implementation phase, a smaller portion that are not. One more thing about this, when we ask the carriers about their plans for the portal, where they are now, most people said they thought their portal was pretty average, but they were aiming for world class. The thing is, if everybody's aiming for world class becomes average. And so you can't stop thinking about that investment. A lot of things that folks are doing to try and make the quoting easier, because that is a big part of the ease of doing business. Again, you see a number of different aspects. Data prefill. Again, this requires opening up APIs so that you can ingest the data. Simplifying the quoting, using different kinds of underwriting rules and AI. Other kinds of data entry tools, such as OCR, intelligent document automation. Advice engines. These are really growing, and this is particularly important as we bring in a number of new players on the CSR end who don't actually understand much about insurance. But even with all of that investment, you can see that there's still quite a lot of room for improvement. If what the agents are looking for is, let me just enter it once and be done with it, that's really only happening here in personal lines. And there's a lot of variation here in workers' comp and small commercial. You can see that, you know, these folks here at 32%, twice as much business going through as the average, right? So there's a lot of room if you're able to increase your capabilities and drive that straight through processing. Now, this is the slide that I thought was the most interesting of all of the studies that we did. Let me explain it briefly. This blue is, we ask the agents how you prefer to interact with your insurance carrier. And the blue is, I just want to use technology and never talk to anybody. The green is, I want to start with technology and then pick up the phone. And the gray is, I don't want to use technology. I just want to talk to somebody. And this right here, this 29% for the Gen Z, to me was a huge surprise, because we think of Gen Z, the youngest of the cohort groups, as wanting to use technology. They're clearly digital natives, and yet you see that 29% of them would rather talk to a human being. And that number declines the older they get, until the silent generation says, yeah, I don't need to talk to people to get my job done. Now, the question then is why? And it clearly is not that they're not comfortable. You can see 57% here, 14% here, so 73% very comfortable with technology. I think that the issue here is that they don't understand insurance, and they want to make sure that they're providing their customers with the right kinds of capabilities. Now, the implications for an insurance company is pretty staggering, because these folks who don't need to talk to humans as much will be retiring, and talking to a human being is quite expensive. And so the challenge for an insurance carrier is certainly, how do you maintain a dual pathway, but also how can you use technology to eliminate some of these human interactions while still giving the comfort to the CSRs and the producers that they are doing the right thing. So a lot of changes going on in the world of the industry, but what I'd like to do now is get started with the most interesting part of this webinar, a discussion with some of the most strategic thinkers in the business. So I'm going to start by having each of them introduce themselves, and then I have a billion questions for them. And of course, we'd love it if you have any questions as well. We'll be delighted to take those. So let me start with Abby. Abby, can you give a brief introduction of yourself? Tell your story for a few minutes, and then we'll go on to the next.
Sure. Abby Hosseini, I'm Mercury Insurance Group's CIO. I've been with the company going into 14 years. We are in Southern California and a US only property and casualty company.
Great. Lisa?
Sure. Lisa Piers. I am with the Hanover Insurance Company. I have been here just over 2 years. We are US based as well, P&C. We're in Worcester, Massachusetts. That's where our main headquarters are. And then within P&C, we're personal lines, commercial lines, and specialty focused. Our distribution is mostly, it's solely through independent agents. And some of what we've been doing over the last couple of years is building capability, but also really taking our automation practices to the next level. Happy to be here today.
Beautiful. Brad, how about you?
Good morning. Brad Luntz. I'm the Chief Information Officer for Copperpoint Insurance Companies. Copperpoint's a Western super regional, so about 15 states in the West. P&C, heavy focus on workers' comp, but we have other lines that we write as well. Distribution is through limited distribution and independent agents. So we appoint a few agents and then really focus on those. And the other thing that's interesting for Copperpoint is we've gone through a couple of acquisitions in the last 4 to 5 years. So working through those. Good morning, everybody.
Great. Great. And Nachi, how about you?
Hey folks, I'm Nachikeet Jewelker, Raghavan Nachi. I had the insurance advisory side of ExaValue. As some of you might know, ExaValue is a technology services and insurance consulting and advisory firm. We started about 4 years ago now, but made up of many folks who have spent decades in consulting and the industry side. And giving away my age, but I'm one of those.
Beautiful. So we're going to move on to the Q&A, and I'm going to stop sharing my screen so we can actually see the folks who are speaking. And so let's start then with Lisa. Lisa, your organization is in the process of redesigning the whole experience for the agents. And how did you go about creating your vision for a digitally enabled agent experience?
Sure. So we started with personas. So we identified, and it wasn't just agent personas, it was agent, underwriter, as well as customer personas, and mapped them out, across the journey and identified really those moments of truth. What are those points that matter most? And then looked at where are we relative to those points and how do we start to think about how digital plays a part in that? Essentially, what we came up with was a set of initiatives or capabilities that we identified as potentially able to advance us, right? So we looked at that. And the way we made the decision is we really looked at, where do we get the biggest bang for the buck? Where do we get the return on investment? And then we started to sequence the work. And we've built incrementally through that. I think the biggest learning was this, right? So we did this, we designed personas, we got feedback. And then as we started to build, we really leveraged more of our internal stakeholders. And it was really important for us to remind ourselves to not just think about it from the inside out. And so we use UX practices now, tools, agency visits to really make sure we put ourselves in the shoes of those that are using what we're providing. And so that was, some of what we learned along the way and a lot of what we do.
Yeah, that can be really hard to take that outside in perspective instead of going with the things that we feel most comfortable with. Now, Brad, price, ease of doing business, and relationship. This is what the agent said was the most important to them. How do you think about price versus ease of doing business? Are those the most important characteristics in your experience?
Yeah, and I think I would start with commercial insurance is pretty expansive, right? And I don't think you can generalize agencies too much. There's certainly those agencies that are heavily focused on price, and I think then there's other agencies that are really price matters, but they look at the full value proposition and a lot of other factors, right? So I think for CopperPoint, we lead with, of course, competitive pricing is table stakes. If you're not competitive on the pricing, you're not even going to get an opportunity. But if you can be competitive, then the ease of doing business begins to be a differentiator for you. So I think the other thing that we look at is ease of doing business isn't always technology. Technology, certainly when you think about, dynamic appetite and accord uploads and those kinds of things that would make the agency's jobs easier, drive down their costs. Those are certainly important. But I think ease of doing business can also be the human interactions of things. Things like, having a consistent underwriting appetite so that they know, hey, CopperPoint's going to write this risk, or I'm not even going to spend my time putting it in because this doesn't match their appetite. So having that consistency, that's just as much an ease of doing business as a good technology play. So I think, just doing a little better in all of those areas adds up to an overall differentiation. So we try to look at the whole pie.
I totally agree with you. Some of the agencies that I've spoken with, they say, the number one thing an insurance company can do to improve the relationship is just answer the freaking phone. If you can do that in 2 rings, even better. Now, Abby, Brad mentioned a couple of solutions that help to drive that ease of doing business, right? And ease of doing business is increasingly being driven by reductions in data entry. So we see a lot of insurance companies investing in things like third-party data and data pre-fill. But there were a wide number of other things that people are investing in, as we saw from that one chart, right? Data platforms, solutions to convert Accord apps into data, solutions to convert loss runs into data, solutions to convert photos into data. Are you using any of these? And is it worth it? I mean, how do you justify the cost of these kinds of tools?
That's good.
Abby, I think you're on mute. There you are.
As Lisa mentioned, I think thinking about personas is really important. And a few years ago, we looked at customer journeys and customer personas. And as part of that, also looked at our agent journey and persona. We had done a study that showed that the agents really are most interested in price and commission at the time, and not so much on the power of your agent portal. But that has changed drastically. I think the experience that the agents want in the portal is really important. And developing that for the principal in the agency versus the CSR is also really important. We did things like dealing with the downloads and the automation into the AMS system, but also had to make sure that we provide a fair amount of data to the agents, things like Google Maps or pre-fills and capabilities that allow satellite imagery or information that comes from a data fabric that we can provide to the agent. Additionally, we had to deal with omni-channel adjuster or agent to underwriter support. It was really important for us to really think about how we go beyond phone contact and provide chats and FAQs and chatbot capability between the underwriter and the agent. That has been a game changer in many respects because it allows the underwriting organization to be more available to the agents for some of the issues that we might have in the process. And I think the last part of the challenge that we're focusing on is more about making sure that the agents are not disintermediated while we increase our communication with the customers, whether it's through chat and SMS and outreach, to streamline the process of helping the customers with the experience that they have with the carrier, but keeping the agent in the loop in that process.
Yeah, I think that's really important. And I want to come back to that topic a little later, this whole idea of disintermediation and policyholder self-service. But while we're thinking about some of these tools and the data, Nachi, I know you've worked with a number of insurance companies using data. And when you look at the use of data when it comes to agency sales and distribution, it's not just about pre-fill or converting unstructured data to structured data. It's not just about making the transaction easier. We're starting to see some of the sophisticated carriers out there beginning to use data to drive better agency insights and to then drive the transactions around those insights, things like, next best action or cross-sell recommendations or advice engines or lifetime value calculations. Where are you seeing insurance companies most effectively using data to drive this ease of doing business?
So I think Abby mentioned a few, and that's kind of the average investment is these days around chatbots. So that's kind of the max these days, because as you saw in that chart, right? A lot of the younger agents want to pick up the phone or have questions. They don't quite have the experience to, especially when it comes to large commercial and so on. So you want to reduce there's a cost aspect, but also you want to give standardized responses. You want to anticipate the questions before you get to the hard stuff, which requires a human interaction. So chatbots and that technology has matured. A lot of it kind of matured on the DTC side, and it's being brought into the agency side. So that's one area. There's some use of kind of natural language processing algorithms and etc. for, as you mentioned, right, digesting information and kind of, especially for the more complex products, doing some pre-qualification of the submissions. And I think that's going to just improve. That's just going to go on increasing, because on both sides, on the agency side as well as on the carrier side, that's usually the kind of long pole, right? You need more clarifications, and you need kind of human review. So again, this has two benefits. It is obviously has efficiency, but it's also standardization. I mean, it's not a secret that underwriter to underwriter, there can be differences in the the underwriting process and even the appetite. So or the I would say the interpretation of the appetite. So that's one area that I think is going to keep growing. I mean, there is some base, not unsurprisingly, right? There's a lot of basic work that needs to be done, right? Just building the integration between agency management systems and the carriers. A lot of the industry is still catching up. I mean, we went through, still going through transformation for the core systems. Billions were spent in that wave. But now that a lot of that is in place, even at the tier 2, tier 3, sometimes tier 4 carriers, you want to start leveraging that foundation for greater integration. API led. On the agency side, you're seeing AMS systems getting more mature, going on to a SaaS model. So on both sides, there's kind of more industrial applications that can talk to each other. And so there's always going to be work in that area. There's kind of 6 or 7 areas for data interaction or integration. There's appetite and eligibility, new business, quotes, there's policy data downloads, uploads, claims communication, and then there's the kind of documents that need to go back and forth. And finally, the commission statements, right, DVCS. So all of those, I mean, it's a substantial work still to be done there. So it's not all, AI and ML. This the unglamorous part of hooking systems together. And like I mentioned, now we have, industry, unlike in the past where you had a lot of custom systems on one end, on both sides, you're actually seeing more standardized systems. So, hooking them together isn't so cost prohibitive. And I think that's where you will continue to see some investment.
Yeah, and let me just follow up by saying it's not only about the insurers, carriers level of data, but the agencies, especially some of these very large ones, are using data much more effectively. And actually, I think are using that data to gain power over the insurers, right? Because there's this lack of transparency. A quote comes out and the policyholder saw them all and the agent saw them all, but the carrier only saw the one that they submitted, right? And they don't always have transparency to why the decisions are being made. So for the insurance carriers, it's not just about, do I have the data to drive my own transactions, but how can I use the data that the agents might be using against me? Brad, agents, I want to follow up on the comment that Nachi had made about integration with agency management systems, because agents tell us that integration is a key element of ease of doing business. And most carriers do have some kind of asynchronous upload, download capability, right? But those traditional mechanisms are pretty expensive. They typically go through a third party and there's a fee per transaction. And we are increasingly seeing insurers opening up their APIs for direct integration with the agency management system, which of course has the additional benefit of easing integration to the digital agents or to the third-party data providers or to all of those other things. How are you looking at integration? I mean, from your perspective, how important is real time versus asynchronous? And is this need for agency management system integration increasing, decreasing?
Yeah, I think a lot of what Nachi said really resonates. I think the first thing that I think about is real-time interaction. I think is more important when you think about small commercial versus large commercial, right? When you think about large commercial, it's not as time sensitive. There's more focus on, hey, we need to put together a proposal for the client, look at loss control, loss sensitive pricing, all of those kinds of things, right? So they're not looking for first quote in wins. But small commercial, absolutely, it drives that way. So we bifurcate a little bit as we look at that and think about technology. And historically, Nachi touched on the system side, but I would also say that from a standardization, there's really been a lack of any kind of standardization when you think about integration and APIs, right? What's a standard quote for workers' compensation insurance? It just didn't exist. And I think that's still a challenge. I think there's becoming some kind of de facto standards out there just from, some of the consolidation and so forth in the market. I think the other thing that's been a challenge though, is when you look at the carrier side, everybody's got monolithic, large core platforms that just were not set up to have granular APIs. And I think that's definitely starting to change. A lot of the system modernization is starting to allow you to expose an API that will do just appetite, do just quick quote, then do bindable quote, those kinds of things. And that's key. If you can't get those granular APIs, you really can't play in that space. So I think that's a positive step that we see, and we're certainly focused on that area. I think the bigger challenge for us now is, as you look at these integrations, how do you get enough risk information back through the integration so that you can provide a competitive price? If you ask an underwriter, I need 900 questions answered, and then I'll really know the risk, and nobody's going to answer 900 questions, right? And so how do you then look at the opportunity to leverage third-party data so that I don't need to ask questions? I can just go figure it out for ourselves. The source of that is probably better anyway than asking a bunch of questions. And then really, challenging, do you really need all these questions, or does it make a difference, right? Going back and starting to look at some of the predictive models and analytics to understand, does the answer to this question really make a difference from a loss perspective, or is it just something that we've always asked and so people are comfortable with it? So those are kind of the areas that we're pushing on is, let's reevaluate the question set. Let's reevaluate where we can get the answers to that so we can streamline that more.
Which can create some incredible cultural issues, right? If the underwriters are used to asking 900 questions and you're saying, but the analysis shows these 400 have no impact on the end result, we're taking them away, there's a little bit of a freak out factor going on.
Oh, yeah.
That's a technical term, by the way, freak out factor.
Yeah. Yep. And, and nobody wants to think that as an underwriter, you're minimizing my contribution, right? That's the other part of the culture. So, yeah.
Yeah. Abby, I want to follow up on this API question though, because if all of the carriers are aiming for world class, and world class becomes average, right? Everybody is sitting there right now focusing on that future state technical roadmap to get them to that world class. How important? I mean, how do the APIs feed into that future state roadmap? Is it a big part of making it more agile? I mean, is it more important than this asynchronous? Like, do the sophisticated agents even use your portal? Is creating an open API model a differentiator, or is it table-stakes from your point of view?
Well, it absolutely is, but it's a differentiator not just with agencies, but also with your own organization, with your own applications. I mean, there is, hundreds of applications in every carrier organization, but not enough integration. And I think as we try to democratize data and really democratize ways of innovating, opening that access to your backend systems, your applications becomes really critical. I mean, IT struggles to deliver projects. There's high volume of projects, integration challenges could cost organizations quite a bit of money nowadays. And we find it harder and harder to integrate our user-facing applications with the core processing systems. And we're all victims of data silos. Data silos that either have data quality issues or data governance issues. So as we are solving all of these problems, we find ourselves in a world where the environment has to become composable. In other words, the application, the data needs to be available for different purposes across the organization, and that's where the APIs come in. They come in to help us open up our capabilities to different sides of the business. And technologies like GraphQL can really allow you to deal with both coarse-grained APIs as well as fine-grained APIs. And creating an API factory becomes really critical as well. We are seeing that some high-tech agencies want to see the APIs and publish and work with them. But I do want to highlight one important aspect of this whole API-led approach, and that is the existence of an ecosystem. If you don't have the right partners that are willing to consume your APIs, and if you don't have the ease of doing business, in other words, if you're asking 50 questions about a property or tens of questions about a car, APIs are not going to help. So I think you have to really think about streamlining your appetite and your capabilities using APIs and really getting into an ecosystem of partners that can leverage the APIs for success. So hopefully that helps answer your question.
Yeah, that's great. So Lisa, I want to move to you because it's easy to look at automation when the business is high homogeneity, right? Personal auto, small commercial. But you do a lot of specialty business, and specialty business agents want high touch. And that's expensive, right? So if you're an insurer that is working with middle market or large commercial or specialty business, how can you start to think about shifting the agents to a more digital channel? How do you move from that high touch to a digital model without breaking the experience? And by the way, and how are the employees reacting to that? Because they probably like providing high touch. And so there's cultural issues involved with that as well. So what's your perspective around that?
Yeah, so I'm going to go back to something Brad said about what ease of use actually means. And if I'm an agent, ease of use means I can get what I need, the questions I have answered, when I want them answered, by whom I want them answered, right? And sometimes that means they want a phone call. Sometimes that means they want a chat. But sometimes it means they just want to know where they can go to get this relatively easily. And so it's really hard to build an experience with all of those things. So the way we think about it is, even in a high touch model, it's about looking at what do we do, right? What are all those points of interaction? And where are there some that may not add as much value to the relationship, to the ease of use? And you can start to think about using digital, right? And when I say digital, I mean putting information on our portal. It could be a chat capability instead of a phone call. how to use technology essentially to really make those things easier so that the value is about the expertise, the relationship, because these businesses are quite complex. The challenge is, at least the way we see it, is underwriters get they get credit, they get accolades for that superior service that they provide. And so how do you start to change the reward system? Because essentially what may be happening is they're disenfranchising the technology that's been built. So how do you think about that? And so I think it's about building slowly. It's about changing. This is about the people side of it, right? Changing the reward system, incenting different behaviors that then can incent of the employer, the underwriter, that then can incent different behaviors of the agent, while still, really making sure that ease of use, what's best, is what's top of mind. And I think it's my own opinion is it's important to use data and to understand what's actually happening before making assumptions that something's going to work or not work, right? So what percentage of calls or what percentage of the interactions focus on A, B, or C, and how do we start to think about that a little differently? And look, I think every business is going to be different, and every business is going to need to look at, product line by product line, look at what it means to provide ease of use. So.
Yeah, just a quick follow-up, and I didn't throw this into the original question set that I sent out, but I'd be curious about your view. I remember when I was an underwriter, and we would have these big honking and huge files that we would underwrite, and they were hard work, and so it was really nice to occasionally get just a little thing that was really fast and easy to rest my mind. But we've automated that all away, right? And so the underwriters, all they have now is the hard stuff. And so my first question would be, how do the underwriters think about managing that complex workload? And second of all, how do you think about training underwriters? Because often you train them on the easy stuff, and then they eventually are able to handle complex. And similarly, on the agency side, the CSRs coming in, if it's all automated, how do they learn about insurance? And I'm sorry I didn't think about this question earlier, but I'd be really interested in your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think so. We provide a lot of training programs, and I think so the way I think about it is the downtime, the sort of easier is the opportunities to actually learn and train rather than doing the work that's actually being automated. And the way we're focused with our automation tools and technology is really providing lift on the back end. So we're focused on doing things like content extraction, et cetera, to really start to drive efficiency. I think what you do with the capacity is you actually put a really good training program together, and you give the time back to the underwriters for their own personal learning and growth. And so that's sort of, I think, the way to answer that. And here's the reality. There's so much nuance to this business that I think there's always going to be some things that are a little lighter for an underwriter to focus on, at least in our world. So I think it's a balance of those two things.
Got it. I want to move on to Brad. Brad, there's been a lot of concern about the disintermediation of agents as carriers take on tasks like direct bill or service centers, or the policyholder self-service continues to increase. How are you thinking about providing these services without disintermediating the agent?
Yeah, well, I like the slide that you had that showed, across the age brackets that, people still want that human interaction. And so, when you think about that, even with younger people, and I think a lot of us tend to think, oh, as you get younger people, they're not going to want to talk to a human, and that's just not showing to be true, right? So we look at, where can we offer services and capabilities that are more transactional. So it is the kind of thing that I don't need to talk to somebody to do, right? If you're telling me that I have to call somebody to pay my bill, that's a problem, right? That's just a transaction I just want to execute. I don't need any help on. But I might, if I'm trying to put a risk through and I've got some questions on this coverage, or, I'm not sure that I'm offering the right thing, then that's where I might need some consultative help. So we try to focus on what are those transactions that are more administrative tasks that we can provide that kind of automation capability and offer those. I think largely the agents appreciate that. It's a change. So we went through a process of moving from agency bill to fully direct, and some agents look at that and go, "Oh, you're stepping into, this is where my value add is," and you kind of walk them through, "Hey, are you really adding value here? Does the policyholder care, or is this just something that we can take off your plate so that you can really focus your time on making sure that they have the right coverages as their business changes throughout the year?" So I think, especially on the commercial side, we rely on our agents to bring the right risks to us, and we rely on them to have an understanding of what those risks are. And so the disintermediation, I think if you're purely down into small where it's just kind of spreadsheeted risks, yeah, there's more risk there. But I think we look at the partnership of we're trying to take the administrative tasks off of your plate so that you can focus where you're really adding value, and that value is making sure that we're offering the best product to the policyholder.
Yeah. So a follow up then for Nachi, because taking the administrative tasks off implies that you've automated them away. And so Nachi, when you think about the tech investments that are necessary to drive ease of doing business, is it more important on focusing on the user interface and what the agent experience is, upfront, or is it more important to digitize the back end, right? Increasing the operations. So the front end, making simplified processes, or the back end to automate it all away. If you were a carrier and you could only do one, where would you focus your tech investment?
I think we've kind of answered it through the discussion, right? I think there's no substitute for the back-end integration, because you can only do so much without on the front-end side. Without actual integration between the two systems, you're not going to be able to answer questions quickly. You can't all the fancy stuff on the front end, like the chatbots, not going to work unless you have integration. So I think if ever asked, I would say, you should focus on getting the base plumbing in, because that's not something you can avoid in the long run. So just get it done with, and then you can build on a much sounder foundation. Otherwise, you'll kind of keep repeating some of the having to reinvest, if you will, as your platform becomes more robust. You find more opportunities, and some of the things that you put together kind of, are not quite, have reached a limit, and then you have to restart. So, just bite the bullet, get the integration done, and then start building on top of it. I mean, there are a few things that you could, you could cobble together from a front-end perspective, but yeah, I think the hard work is is the back end stuff.
Yeah. So I do want to remind the audience that if you have any questions, please put them in the chat bot. We're going to try and make sure to answer those towards the end. But Abby, what if what happens to insurance is kind of the same thing that happened to travel, right? I mean, with comparative raters, with these aggregators, it kind of feels like we're moving more down that path. I mean, small commercial, workers' comp is now in these rating engines, or the comparative raters. I mean, today an agent can get a rate, right? But they also want to find. So eventually, you're going to have to give them an API that doesn't just give them a rate, but gives them a find. And how prepared do you think the insurance industry is for this? Are the insurers ready? Are the agents ready? I mean, where's this going?
Yeah, I mean, this is certainly something that keeps us up at night, thinking about, how does platform modernization, which is what we've been doing for years, going to prepare us for this kind of an API experience. When you look at the travel industry, I mean, the branding is now driving the consumer selection. There's obviously the price. You'll see the to and the from when you're looking at Expedia or Kayak, and you pick an experience based on the brand experience that you have with a particular airline, assuming the price is good, and other safety protections are there. So when we look at the insurance, I think it's more like the easy transactions are going to be completely seamless, API enabled, quote and bind. But then the more complex things, like when you have a cruise or a sightseeing experience that requires a lot more hand-holding, that goes to the agent, and the agent has to really work with the customer. So as we're kind of looking at how do we open our systems to be able to play in that platform economy or API economy, obviously simplifying ease of doing business in terms of the appetite, the amount of questions we ask, a number of clicks involved, all of that has to be built into our platforms to be able to accommodate that. And on the agency side, I mean, there are clearly some agents that are tech savvy and have their own platforms and are making an investment. And then there's aggregators and multi-raters that are also playing the intermediary. So it's not clear at this point, where the market is going to go. Is there going to be the emergence of some Expedia kayak kind of experience, or more of a super agency that has good tech that works with many carriers? The bad news is that we have to be prepared for that with our core platforms, and that's where we are, working on making sure that we open and democratize the platform.
Yeah, and so follow up for you, Lisa, because if indeed this does continue down that path, the Expedia kind of path, and we're kind of already seeing this with personal lines, right? Personal lines is already heavily distributed with a direct-to-consumer model. And we continue to see this increase in interest in small business and workers' comp. But a lot of insurance companies are tied strategically to an independent agency channel. So for a carrier who wants to address that direct-to-consumer model, I mean, one option is for the carrier just to go and sell direct. Another one is to work with digital agents. But a third option is to help their agents keep the clients who from going direct, right? By helping the agents create their own digital capabilities. And I'm curious, from your perspective, which of these strategies seems the most viable?
I think the last one, well, the way we think about it is the last one. It's really about helping the agents. I think it's interesting. Direct to consumer is today more about the monoline. It's a point in time, and I think there's a lot of great acquisition, new business that's happening, but where are those individuals going a year later, 2 years later? What does the retention side of this look like? And so the way I think to think about it is, if you could get really slick on the front end, right? You're an agent. Do you have the right marketing websites? Are you really thinking about new business and doubling down on that, regardless of what the cost of acquisition is? Because if you can get good value from that, then you can really start to grow your book over time and retain it, because I think agents own the relationship with a customer. That still has not changed, I don't believe. And as a result of that, they're best positioned to do the retention part. And so if insurers can help with digital ambassadors or whatever that is, even providing tools that are much easier, I think it then positions them to continue to win. So that's the way I think about that.
Great. Now, we only have a few minutes left. There is one question in the chat box for Nachi, which is, could you please repeat the 6 areas of integration and their importance? Off of mute. Nachi, I think you're still on mute.
Yeah, sorry, I was trying to find the mute button, the unmute button. Yeah, so it kind of follows the life cycle. So there's quotes, there's policy information back downloads, there's documents going back and forth. There'll be claims, commissions, and I think I'm missing one, appetite. Yeah, so that actually is front at the start. So there's 7 actually: appetite, policy, documents, claims, commissions, and I think I missed one again there, but I was reading them off the top of my head. I can definitely note them down.
Perfect. Okay, so I have one last question for each of you. As we look to the future, I mean, it looks like there's going to be increasing competition and limited shelf space for the insurers with the agents. And the largest agents are amassing more and more power as they continue down their merger and acquisition path. What are the top couple of areas that you would recommend insurance companies focus on right now to either retain or improve their shelf space position? And let's start with Abby.
I mean, from my perspective, Carlene, I think there's a host of things that we have to focus on. Onboarding is still an experience with agents that we need to focus on. The whole commission capability, whether it's incentive or commission accounting experience, has to be really streamlined. The compensation and the commission structure has to be pretty transparent. All of us carriers have very complex commission structures that not only exacerbates the ability to work with agents, but also sometimes leads into mistrust or errors and what have you. Having some what-if analysis capability as we work with agents to make sure that we are scenario planning capabilities to really get the best value from the fewest number of agents, because some of us have a lot of agencies, but we're not necessarily doing as much business with all of them. And maybe focusing on providing better service to fewer agents is a better approach. And for that purpose, you have to have the analytics to know what works, what doesn't, and really analyze the producers' throughput capabilities. Having partner relationship management tools to be able to go talk to the agents, understand what their issues are with our products, with our prices, with our customer relationship. Using some PRM or CRM tool is really important as well. So I think, when you look at it from the standpoint of onboarding, commission, reporting, and compliance, all of that factors into the experience of working with the agents.
Yeah, a whole area we didn't even talk about. Yeah. Brad, how about you? What advice would you have?
Yeah, I think Abby touched on a lot of really good ones. I would start with, I think relationships still matter. So as the market starts to consolidate, being able to still have that relationship and being able to articulate your value proposition to the agencies. So again, they know what's going to be a good fit for CopperPoint. When do I want to go that direction versus go a different direction? I think focusing on opportunities to take friction out of the channel. So things like, nobody wants to rekey data anymore. So where can we get rid of keystrokes and automate that data exchange? And then lastly, just, continuing to kind of make it easy from reducing underwriting questions, using third-party data for getting the information that you need to provide a competitive price back. I think those would be the three areas I'd focus on.
Great. Lisa, what's your perspective?
Well, Abby and Brad did such a nice job covering so much. I guess I'll say the ease of use, a holistic view on ease of use and how to continue to differentiate with agents there so that they can best serve their customers is critical. The second is a robust data strategy, because it's just as much about knowing what you have and using what you have inside of your four walls, but also what else do you need that potentially gives you insight and advantage that you might not necessarily have. I think that's an important one. And then the third, it's a little more futuristic, but really making sure that you continue to look at the future trends, because I do believe consumer needs are changing. Therefore, products are essentially going to change over some time, and how to get ahead of that is important as well.
I wish we had more time, another hour to talk with everybody, but we are out of time. So let me turn this back over to Jazz Paul. And thank you, everybody, for attending this, and of course for our panelists for speaking. And Judge Paul, would you like to say the last few words?
Yeah, and thank you so much, Carlin, for those questions and for your presentation. This was such an interesting conversation today. And I agree. 1 hour is not enough. I think we could carry on for another 2 hours. There's really a lot to talk about. I don't know. Maybe we have another session sometime. I don't know, guys. But thank you to the panelists. Brad, Lisa, Abby, Carly, and Nachi, I think you did a terrific job today. It was extremely valuable. And to the audience, thank you for attending. We did record the session. It will be available to you. We will be sending a survey. Please take a few seconds to fill it in. It is really helpful. And with that said, thank you all, and wish you a great weekend. Thank you.
Guys.
Thank you very much.